Hi, my name is Dr. Camilla Bassi, or Camilla, and a very warm welcome to my presentation, which is titled, Can Biophilia Save Humanity and Planet Earth? Commencing with a definition of biophilia, I will then explain how the climate crisis is and can be understood, and then discuss how biophilia is central to any meaningful and effective ecological movement to saving ourselves as a species, other species and planet Earth. The word biophilia is commonly attributed source to the biologist Edward Wilson, namely his book Biophilia, which was published in 1984, followed by an edited collection titled The Biophilia Hypothesis in 1993. For Wilson, biophilia, I quote, is the innately emotional affiliation of human beings to other living organisms. He calls upon psychologists and other academics to urgently investigate, in the context of the natural environment, what will, I quote, happen to the human psyche when such a defining part of the human evolutionary experience is diminished or erased. Despite the popular association of biophilia with Edward Wilson, it was in fact the humanistic Marxist philosopher and psychoanalyst Erich Fromm who first introduced the term, specifically in his book The Heart of Man, Its Genius for Good and Evil, published in 1964, and The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, published in 1973. The concept is also implicitly touched upon in Fromm's books The Sane Society and Marx's Concept of Man. Like Wilson, Erich Fromm considers biophilia, the love of life, as having a biological grounding, specifically as an innate tendency in all living beings to preserve life and to fight death. But for Fromm, biophilia is more than this. It's an innate tendency to integrate and to unite. Unlike Wilson, Fromm's basis for studying biophilia is not biology, but the conditions of existence that shape us as human beings, as fundamentally social beings, and the capitalist conditions of existence that estrange us, that take us away from the basic need to socially connect. Fromm's biophilia, I think, offers us a rallying point for ecological sovereignty, political autonomy over the environment, amidst the climate crisis confronting the 21st century. Within geography, the Anthropocene, from the Greek word anthropos meaning human being, is the term designated to the thesis that human activity has tipped the Earth into a new geological age. On the concept of Anthropocene, Benjamin Kunkel writes, it expresses an awareness that environmental change of the most durable significance is taking place as we speak, with unaccustomed speed. Little besides a giant asteroid or a nuclear war could alter the surface of the Earth faster or more completely. It designates a contemporary situation in which humanity, accidentally or deliberately, engineers the planet's condition and then sets this present moment in a span of time stretching decades, centuries, millennia into the past and future. Kunkel identifies the Anthropocene as, I quote, a watchword of despair. He reviews Andreas Mamm's book Fossil Capital, which was published in 2015, and summates Andreas Mamm's critique of the Anthropocene. I quote, Andreas Mamm locates the headwaters of the present ecological crisis in the global warming set off by coal-burning industrialisation. Mamm complains that in the Anthropocene narrative, climate change is relocated from the sphere of natural causes to that of human activities, only to be renaturalised a moment later as the excregence, the waste of an innate human trait. Capitalism, in a small corner of the Western world, invested in steam, laying the foundation of the fossil economy. At no moment did the species exercise any sort of shared authority over its own destiny or that of the Earth system. Nor in the time since has the species, us as human beings, en bloc, become ecologically sovereign, politically autonomous over ourselves and planet Earth. In the early 21st century, the poorest 45% of humanity generated 7% of CO2 emissions, while the richest 7% produced 50%. For Malm, capitalism must be recognised as the overriding determinant of humanity's recent ecological career if the present era of natural history is to become a useful object of analysis, not merely of procrastination, hand-wringing. In simple terms, the argument here is that it's not the fault of ordinary human beings en masse that we have a climate crisis. It's the fault of capitalism, which has denied us as ordinary human beings of our political agency and autonomy. Fromm's concept of biophilia is grounded in an understanding that capitalist social relations removes us from our social relationship to other living beings and to nature. He stresses the necessity to unite with other living beings, to be related to them, is an imperative need on the fulfilment of which our sanity depends. This need is behind all phenomena which constitute the whole gamut of intimate human relations, of all passions which are called love in the broadest sense of the word. Fromm recognises that our spiritual health, our mental health, flourishes when our conditions of existence provide freedom to, rather than simply freedom from. This freedom to allows us to grow into total human beings, which are based on our relationships to one another, to ourselves, and to the world. Here he draws upon Karl Marx's concept of total being, who has independence and freedom, the act of self-creation, who are able to achieve full individuality through full relationships with the world. Quoting Marx, total beings are able to see, hear, smell, taste, feel, think, will, and love fully. The whole life of the individual is nothing but the process of giving birth to oneself. Indeed, we should be fully born when we die, although it is the tragic fate of most individuals to die before they are born. Fromm defines biophilia as the passionate love of life, and of all that is alive, it is the wish to further growth, whether in a person, a plant, an idea, or a social group. The tendency to preserve life and to fight against death is the most elementary form of biophilia and is common to all living beings. The more positive aspect of biophilia that Fromm stresses is the tendency of all living substance to integrate and to unite, to fuse with different and opposite entities, and to grow in a structured way. Unification and integrated growth are characteristic of all life processes, not only as far as cells are concerned, but also with regard to feeling and thinking. Biophilia, Fromm understands, is the normal impulse of living beings, whereas its opposite, necrophilia, is the result of a life unlived. Most societies fuel conditions of existence for both our creative and destructive tendencies, just as most people are a combination of biophilous and necrophilous orientation. The question is which wins out. A healthy society, quoting Fromm, furthers our capacity to love others, to work creatively, to develop our reason and objectivity, to have a sense of self which is based on the experience of our own creative powers. Whereas an unhealthy society is one that creates mutual hostility, distrust, which transforms us into an instrument of use and exploitation for others, which deprives us of a sense of self. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that Erich Fromm wrote during the 20th century Cold War. And he warned that a lack of protest against nuclear warfare, which was a real threat during the Cold War, reveals, again I quote, how far we have already gone into the valley of the shadow of death. Now, this observation about a lack of protest against nuclear warfare, I think, is an observation that has critical relevance amidst our own era of climate crisis. Ultimately, a political struggle is needed for a global and grassroots democratic solution to climate crisis. A solution that enables the full unfolding of biophilia and the full development of people who don't dominate nature but become one with it. Erich Fromm, again, bearing in mind the context of which he was writing, which was the Cold War, was a fierce critic of both capitalism and Stalinist totalitarianism, i.e. the communist bloc. His vision of socialism was, in many respects, much healthier, much more grassroots, egalitarian and democratic. He wanted to end egotism. He saw that we were alienated, removed from our own bodies and from nature, and that affected our mental life and our human life. Indeed, he explains, he elucidates, Marx's concept of socialism is a protest, as is all existentialist philosophy, against the alienation of humans, our removal from one another. If, as Aldous Huxley put it, our present economic, social and international arrangements are based in large measure upon organised lovelessness, then Marx's socialism is a protest against this very lovelessness. Fromm's socialism was a vision against the exploitation of human beings, of other human beings, against the exploitation of other living beings, against the exploitation of nature. Fromm's vision of socialism was for a struggle for meaningful creative life, for life creating life, and for ecological sovereignty and biophilia. Now, in this spirit, I'm going to end with a quote from the socialist James Connolly. "Be moderate," the trimmers cry, "who dread the tyrant's thunder. You ask too much and people fly from you aghast in wonder. 'Tis passing strange, for I declare such statements give me mirth, for our demands most moderate are. We only want the earth. Our masters all a godly crew, whose hearts throb for the poor. Their sympathies assure us too, if our demands were fewer, but most generous souls. But please observe, what they enjoy from birth is all we ever had the nerve to ask, that is, the earth." Thanks very much for listening, and take care.